The light comes slowly here. It doesn't arrive the way it does in summer, bold and certain, filling a room before you've opened your eyes. In southern England in the spring of 1944, the light arrives like a question, pale, tentative, filtering through canvas or condensation-fogged glass, falling across the floor of a Nissen hut in thin, watery strips. You wake before it fully forms. You have been waking before it for weeks. There is a smell you have grown used to without ever quite accepting, the low animal warmth of too many bodies in an enclosed space, the faint sweetness of boot polish, the ghost of yesterday's cigarette smoke soaked into the walls and blankets. The hut breathes around you, a low wooden structure curved like the spine of something enormous, lined on both sides with metal cots pressed close together. The man 2 beds down from you coughs, rolls over, resettles. Someone near the door is already lacing his boots in the dark, working by feel, unhurried. You lie still for a moment longer. You have been in England for several months now, long enough that the cold no longer surprises you but still manages to disappoint you each morning. Long enough that you know the sound of the camp before you see it. Long enough that the distance between you and home has ceased to feel like a number and become instead a kind of weight you carry without noticing until you sit down. You are 22 years old, or 24, or perhaps 20. The number matters less than the fact that you are here, and that you have been waiting, and that the waiting has become its own kind of work. You fold back your blanket and sit up. The floor is wood over mud, and it flexes slightly underfoot. Others around you are beginning to stir. There is no urgency in the mornings anymore, or rather, the urgency has become so constant that it no longer registers as urgency. It is simply the texture of the days. You dress methodically, trousers, shirt, jacket, boots. You check the laces twice. You do not know why you check them twice. You checked them the night before, but you do it anyway because checking things is something you can control, and control is what the days have come to revolve around. The small rituals, the repeated gestures, the careful management of the space between what you know and what you don't. Outside, the camp opens around you. It is larger than you can easily hold in your mind as a single thing. Rows of huts and tents stretching across what was, not long ago, a set of farm fields in Hampshire or Dorset or Devon. The English countryside requisitioned and transformed into something that operates with the logic of a small, purposeful city. There are roads here now where there were footpaths, motor pools where there were hedgerows, ammunition stores behind wire fencing where there might have been a gate and a muddy track leading to someone's pasture. You walk through it each morning with the same slightly distant awareness that you are inside something enormous, something whose full dimensions you cannot see from where you stand. The air is cold and damp and smells of wood smoke and diesel, and, beneath it, the faint green wetness of the fields that still exist at the edges of the camp, still trying to be themselves despite everything. In the distance, across a low ridge, you can sometimes hear the channel. Not quite hear it, but sense it, a faint rhythmic pressure at the edge of sound. You have spent enough time near it now that your body has begun to register its presence without your mind needing to acknowledge it. Breakfast is early and efficient. The mess hall, another long, low-ceilinged structure of corrugated metal, fills quickly. The tables lined with men in various states of morning alertness. The food is not bad, not by the standards you've grown up with, not by the standards of the past few years. Powdered eggs and bread, reconstituted and functional, fuel rather than pleasure. You eat without much attention to taste. The sound in the mess hall is particular, a low male murmur of voices kept deliberately undemanding, conversations that don't press too hard on anything, a kind of collective agreement to keep the surface undisturbed. You have eaten here enough mornings to understand that the tone of the room is not dullness, but management. Everyone here is managing something. There is a man who sits across from you most mornings. You know his first name. You know he's from Ohio. You know he smokes Luckies and that he has a sister he is very close to, because he mentioned her once and you filed it away without meaning to. You do not know what he is thinking on most mornings, and he does not know what you are thinking. And this mutual not knowing is perfectly comfortable, because what you are both thinking is not icily spoken, and does not need to be. You drink your coffee. He smokes. Someone further down the table laughs softly at something, and then it fades. After breakfast, the day opens into its patterns. Training has shifted in recent weeks, not stopped, but changed in quality, in the way a rehearsal feels different when the performance is getting close. There is less of the mechanical repetition of the early months, more of something that resembles finalization. Briefings happen, and then briefings about the briefings, and then there are periods of waiting that don't have names because they aren't official. They are just the intervals between things, filled with whatever a man can find to occupy himself. Some men read. Some play cards with a quiet intensity that has nothing to do with the game. Some write letters, bent over paper with careful concentration, pausing often, staring at a middle distance that isn't anything in the room. You have written letters too. You write to your mother mostly, and sometimes to a girl you know at home whose face you can still picture clearly. Though you've noticed the image becoming slightly less precise over the months, the way a photograph fades, not from the edges but from the eyes outward. You don't write about where you are or what you're waiting for. The censors would remove it anyway. And beyond that, you wouldn't know how to explain it in terms that wouldn't worry her more than the silence does. So you write about small things. The English countryside. The way the light looks in the afternoons when it cuts through overcast skies at an angle. You write carefully, and with a kind of precision that surprises you, because you were never someone who thought much about words before. But there is something about the act of writing here, in this place, with the channel not far, and what lies beyond it closer every day, that makes you want to be exact. To say precisely what you mean, in case it is the last time you mean it. The afternoons are sometimes used for inspections. Your equipment is familiar to you by now in the way your own body is familiar, not consciously noted, but registered instantly if something is wrong. Rifle, ammunition, pack, gas mask. The additional gear that arrived in recent weeks, specialized items that suggested without naming them that the time is nearer than it was. You handle each item with a practiced calm. Others around you do the same. The sergeants move through the ranks with an eye that is professional and essentially unreadable. The inspection ends. You fall out. The evenings are their own country. The light holds longer now than it did in winter. Spring in England means dusk that stretches, the sky reluctant to go dark, holding on to a gray-blue tone long after the sun is technically gone. In this light, the camp becomes briefly human in a way that the daytime efficiency doesn't quite allow. Men sit outside on upturned crates or lean against the walls of their huts. Some play music. Someone always has a harmonica. There's usually a guitar somewhere, played quietly, not performing but simply continuing. You sit with a group of men you have come to know well enough, and you talk about things from before. Cars. Jobs. Baseball. Hometowns described in the tone of places that exist slightly outside of reality now, like places from a book you read a long time ago and can no longer be sure you remember accurately. None of you talk about what is coming. This is not avoidance, exactly. It is more like a kind of collective understanding that the thing exists in a different register than conversation, that, speaking about it in the ordinary currency of words, would somehow diminish it, or make it less manageable, or break the surface tension that is holding everything in its necessary place. So instead you talk about ordinary things with the warmth and attention that ordinary things don't usually receive. Someone describes his mother's cooking with the precision of a man describing a painting he loves. Someone else talks about a river near his hometown in terms that are careful and exact, as if committing it to record. You listen. You contribute your own small archive. The dusk holds. The harmonica continues. At night, in your bunk, you lie in the dark and listen to the camp settle. The sounds layer themselves, distant engines, the creak of the hut's metal roof contracting in the cool air, breathing from nearby bunks modulated into the particular depth of men genuinely asleep. You are not always among them quickly. Sometimes the waiting follows you into the dark, not as fear exactly, though fear is somewhere in it, but as a kind of alertness that has forgotten how to stand down. You think about small things, the letter you will finish tomorrow, the way the light looked this evening, the river someone described. Outside, not far, the channel is continuing its indifferent work, moving between this island and the coast beyond it, which exists for you now primarily as a place on a map, a word, a coastline, a beach whose name you may or may not know yet, where something is going to happen that you cannot fully imagine and therefore cannot fully prepare for. Only wait for, in the long, quiet, particular way that men here have been learning to wait for weeks. You close your eyes. The harmonica has stopped. The camp breathes around you. Morning comes the same way it did the day before and the day before that. The light through the hut's small windows arrives without ceremony, and you are already half awake when it does, surfacing from sleep in the gradual, incomplete way that has become habitual here, never fully under, never fully rested, existing in a band of consciousness that is something between recovery and readiness. You dress without thinking about dressing. Your hands know the sequence. The days have begun to accumulate in a way that is difficult to account for. When you first arrived in England, time moved with a kind of legible structure, training schedules, orientation briefings. The novelty of the landscape and the people, and the particular texture of a foreign country that is also, technically, an ally, which creates an odd doubling of familiarity and strangeness. English towns with their narrow streets and ancient stones, their pubs with low ceilings, and the smell of beer soaked into the wood of centuries, their people who are reserved in a way that is not unfriendly, but takes some reading. All of that was new once. Now it is simply the backdrop, and the days have lost their individual edges and begun to blur into a single extended present tense. There are men here who have been in England longer than you, some since late 1943, some earlier still, soldiers who arrived before the full weight of what was being assembled became apparent, before the fields filled and the ports began to strain, and the sky over the south of England became a regular theater of aircraft movement. These men carry a particular kind of patience that is different from the patience of the newly arrived. It is not calm, exactly. It is more like resignation that has been worn smooth, a long accommodation with uncertainty that no longer announces itself, but is simply present in the way they carry themselves, in the slight compression around the eyes, in the way they laugh at things that aren't quite funny, because laughter is available and so they use it. You understand them better now than you did when you first arrived. You are beginning to become one of them. The camp itself is a world that has organized itself into routines so thoroughly that they no longer require conscious navigation. You move through the day on a kind of internal map, the same routes taken at the same times, the same faces encountered at the same points. The motor pool in the morning, the smell of engine grease and metal warming in the thin spring sun, the supply depot with its stacked crates, and the particular sound of men moving heavy things with practiced efficiency. The communications section, where typewriters clatter behind a closed door, and officers move with the slightly elevated tension of people who know slightly more than you do, and are carrying it accordingly. You observe these things not with curiosity, but with the low-level attention of a man who has learned that environments contain information, that the ordinary surface of a place can be read for what it doesn't say directly. There have been changes in recent weeks that you have registered without being told to register them. The tempo of certain activities has shifted. Equipment that was theoretical has become concrete. Passes into the nearby towns, those brief, necessary escapes into the civilian world, into fish and chip shops and cinema queues, and the disorienting normality of English streets where children played, and women hung washing, and old men read newspapers in doorways. Those passes have become less frequent, and then less frequent again, and now they have stopped altogether. The camp has become a closed thing. This is not announced as significant. It doesn't need to be. The town, when you were still allowed into it, was a particular kind of relief. Not because it was exciting. It was mostly not, in the conventional sense, but because it was human, in a different register than the camp. Civilian, in a way that reminded you of what the world is for, when it is not engaged in this. You remember a tea shop near the high street, run by a woman of 60 or so who spoke to you and your companions with a direct, unsentimental warmth that you found unexpectedly affecting. She brought you tea and did not make a ceremony of it, did not perform gratitude or sentiment, just set the cups down and asked where you were from, as if the answer was going to interest her, and listened when you told her. You remember walking back to camp in the early evening with the particular feeling of someone who has briefly touched a more ordinary version of life and is returning now to the life that is actually happening. Now there is only the camp, and in the camp there is training that has become rehearsal, and briefings that have begun to feel like final instructions, and a collective awareness that the period of waiting, which has itself been a kind of labor, exhausting in ways that are hard to explain to someone who has not experienced it, is entering its last phase. You do not know the date. You know the broad shape of what is coming, but not its exact form. This is standard, this is intentional, and yet it creates a strange interior weather, a condition in which your mind keeps returning to the edge of a thing it cannot see past. The physical training continues, though it has changed character. What was once about building capacity is now about maintaining it, about keeping the body in the particular state of readiness that months of preparation have produced. You run in the mornings with men whose faces you know well by now, along routes that have been run enough times that your feet know the ground, the countryside beyond the camp's perimeter, what remains visible of it, the hedgerow lines and the distant fold of hills, the occasional farmhouse, passes at the edges of your awareness. England, seen this way, in the early morning from inside the rhythm of effort, is quiet and green and ancient in a way that makes the current moment seem both urgent and briefly absurd, as if the land itself cannot quite comprehend what is passing through it. In the afternoons there are often technical rehearsals, the mechanics of embarkation, how men move, how equipment is loaded, how the sequence of a landing is meant to unfold. These have been practiced with a precision that would seem excessive if you did not understand what depends on it. You have rehearsed climbing down nets into smaller craft, the rocking instability of the vessel beneath you, the weight of your kit pulling you toward the water. You have rehearsed under conditions that are unpleasant by design, cold water and gray skies, and the deliberate disruption of comfort, because comfort is not what is coming. Your body has learned things that your mind couldn't fully teach it. Your hands know certain sequences the way they know familiar objects in the dark. What the rehearsals cannot prepare you for, and this is something no one says directly, but everyone understands, is the specific weight of the real thing. The simulation carries its own tension, its own sharpened attention, but underneath it is still a simulation. And some part of your nervous system knows this and withholds accordingly. The real thing will not withhold. You have been told enough by men who have seen other operations, other beaches, other coastlines approached under fire, that the distinction between rehearsal and reality is absolute, a threshold you cross once and then exist on the other side of, permanently altered. This knowledge sits with you. You do not dwell on it because dwelling serves nothing, but you do not pretend it isn't there. In the evenings now, the card games have become more common, not because there is more time, there isn't, but because cards require a certain quality of attention that crowds out other kinds of thinking, and this crowding out has become valuable. You play and lose and play again. The man from Ohio wins more often than seems statistically reasonable and accepts this with a modesty that you suspect is genuine. Someone accuses him of counting cards. He denies it without much conviction. The lamp hangs low over the table. The shadows are familiar. There is a chapel here, a small temporary structure that has the functional seriousness of everything else in the camp. Not beautiful, not meant to be, but present, available, doing what it was built to do. You have been inside it twice. The first time was early on, out of habit more than anything. And the second time was more recently, for reasons you haven't entirely articulated to yourself. The chaplain is a steady, quiet man who does not press. He speaks without drama about things that are very large, and this restraint makes him easy to be around. Others come and go during the day. On Sunday mornings, the small space fills with men who are not necessarily devout, but who are, perhaps, in need of a particular kind of quiet, a pause that has different dimensions than the pause between drills. You understand this without requiring it to be explained. The letters have become harder to write as the date approaches, or rather as the sense of the date approaches, since the date itself remains unknown to you. The difficulty is not emotional, or not only emotional, but practical. There is a particular challenge in writing to your mother when what you want to say is enormous and what you are permitted to say is circumscribed, and when even what is permitted feels inadequate to the actual interior experience of being here, waiting, carrying this. You write around it. You describe the countryside again. You mention that the food has improved slightly, which is a small lie. You ask about the neighbors, about the garden, about the small and specific inventory of home that you have been quietly cataloging in your mind for months, as if ensuring its existence by naming it. You seal the letter and hold it for a moment before putting it in the envelope. There is a particular quality to correspondence in these weeks, a weight that is almost physical, a sense that words sent from here carry something beyond their ordinary content. You are not sentimental about this. You do not perform the feeling. But you are aware of it, the way you are aware of the channel beyond the ridge, as a pressure at the edge of things, present without needing to announce itself. The news reaches the camp in layers and at delays, filtered through official channels and the informal circuits of rumor and observation that run alongside them. You have learned to read both. The official information is accurate, but incomplete. The unofficial information is detailed, but unreliable. Between them, assembled carefully, you can construct a partial picture of the larger shape of things, the war in the Pacific, the grinding progress of the Italian campaign, the Eastern Front continuing its vast, costly work. The world is enormous and moving in many directions at once, and you are here, in a field in southern England, waiting for your particular part of it to begin. There is something strange about knowing that history is happening and that you are inside it, and that you cannot see it clearly from where you stand. You understand in the abstract that what is being prepared is significant not just militarily, but in some larger sense, in the sense that the shape of the world to come depends, in part, on what happens in the weeks ahead. This understanding is real but not quite accessible. It sits at a distance from the actual experience of your days, which are comprised of immediate and concrete things: the weight of your pack, the temperature of the coffee, the way light falls through the hut's door in the late afternoon, the sound of engines that has become so constant it registers only in its absence. The gap between the historical and the personal is something you have thought about in the long evenings, without quite having the language for it. You are a man in a camp in England, eating reconstituted eggs, and writing to your mother, and loosing at cards, and listening to a harmonica in the dusk. You are also, simultaneously, part of something whose scale you cannot hold in your mind. Both of these things are true. Neither cancels the other. You live in the space between them, in the ordinary texture of days that contain, beneath their surface, an extraordinary pressure. The nights have grown slightly milder, as May has deepened, the raw cold of earlier weeks softening into something that still requires a blanket, but no longer bites. You lie in your bunk, and the camp settles around you with its familiar sounds. Somewhere beyond the wire and the dark fields, the channel continues. You have stopped trying to calculate how much longer. The waiting is not a countdown anymore. It is simply the condition you are in, the weather of your life at this moment, and you move through it the same way you have learned to move through everything here, methodically, without waste, one day at a time, until the day that is different from the others arrives. The day that is different from the others does not announce itself in advance. That is the thing about it. You have imagined its arrival so many times, in so many forms, that when the actual signals begin to appear, you almost miss them, or rather you notice them with a strange flatness, a recognition that is quieter than you expected. It begins with small disruptions to the established rhythm. Certain officers are not where they usually are in the morning. A briefing that was scheduled is postponed and then rescheduled for a different hour. The motor pool is busier than usual before dawn. None of these things is conclusive on its own. Together, they constitute a change in atmospheric pressure that every man in the camp can feel without being told to feel it. You eat breakfast with the same deliberate calm of every other morning, but the mess hall is different. Not louder, if anything, slightly quieter, but charged in a way that is unmistakable. Men eat with a focused attention, as if the act of eating requires more concentration than usual. As if each gesture of the ordinary morning is being performed with a heightened awareness of itself. The man from Ohio eats without speaking, which is unusual for him. You do not remark on it. You finish your coffee. You carry your tray to the window. You walk out into the gray morning air. The briefing, when it comes, happens in stages. First the officers, then the non-commissioned officers. Then the enlisted men in groups by unit. Each group brought into a tent or a room and given information calibrated to their role and rank. You wait your turn with the patience that has become, by now, almost reflexive. When you are brought in, the room is close and still, and the officer at the front speaks with a directness that is dispensed entirely with preamble. The maps come out. You have seen versions of these before, in training, in rehearsal, but something about seeing them now, with the understanding that the names on them are not hypothetical, that the beach sectors marked in different colors correspond to actual sand and actual fortifications and an actual coast, makes the room feel different, smaller, more specific. You do not learn everything. This is understood and accepted. What you learn is sufficient for your function, your unit, your objective, your position in the sequence. The larger architecture of the operation remains partially visible to you, and this partiality is intentional. A man who knows only his own piece cannot accidentally surrender the whole picture. You absorb what you are given. You ask one question, a practical one about timing, and the answer is precise and unambiguous. You nod, you file out. Outside, the camp has acquired a new quality of motion. Not frantic. Nothing here is frantic. Because the training has been specifically designed to prevent frenzy, to make even the most urgent sequences feel like procedures that can be executed, but purposeful in a way that is distinguishable from the purposefulness of the ordinary days. Equipment that has been stored is now being moved. Vehicles that have been serviced and waiting are now being positioned. The infrastructure of the operation, which has existed in a state of readiness for weeks, is beginning to shift from readiness into activation, and the difference between those two states, subtle as it might appear from the outside, is everything. You return to your hut and begin the final preparation of your kit. This is work you have done in rehearsal many times, but doing it now carries a different weight, a kind of solemnity that is not performed but simply present, the way certain moments announce their own significance without requiring you to declare it. You lay everything out on your bunk in the prescribed order, rifle cleaned and checked, ammunition counted and distributed across pockets and pouches in the arrangement you have practiced until it requires no thought. Pack, loaded according to a logic of necessity, rations, first aid supplies, the additional items specific to your assignment. Personal effects reduced to the minimum, a photograph, a small object from home whose practical value is nil and whose actual value is considerable. You look at these things briefly. You pack them with the others. There is a letter you have been carrying for 2 weeks, addressed to your mother, sealed, that you have been told will be held and sent only under specific circumstances. You were given this instruction early in the preparations, in the matter-of-fact tone that the Army uses for things it has learned to discuss without dwelling on. You place the letter in the designated envelope and handed it to the appropriate person and have not thought about it directly since then. You think about it now, briefly, and then you put it away in the part of your mind where such things are stored, which is not exactly a place of peace, but is a place of managed distance, a place you have learned to maintain because the alternative is not useful. The afternoon moves with a new speed that has nothing to do with actual time. Tasks that you have performed many times before feel both faster and more deliberate. as if the heightened attention of the day is both accelerating and slowing things simultaneously. You move with your unit through the final checks, the final inspections, the final confirmations of communication procedures and contingency signals. Your sergeant, a man from Tennessee who has been in the Army since before you were drafted and carries this fact as an unremarkable part of himself, moves through these checks with a thoroughness that is entirely without drama. He does not make speeches. He looks at things, touches things, asks specific questions, and receives specific answers. This is its own form of steadiness, and you are grateful for it without saying so. In the early evening, the movement toward the embarkation point begins. You have known this point was coming, have seen it on maps, have understood it as a destination, but arriving at it is nonetheless a threshold moment. The kind of moment that inserts itself between what came before and what comes after with the precision of a blade. The vehicles move in convoy along roads that have been cleared and controlled, past checkpoints staffed by military police, whose faces are professionally blank, past the edges of English towns, where a few civilians stand watching from pavements with expressions you can't easily read, something between pride and grief, and something else for which there isn't a clean word. You watch them through the side of the vehicle, and they recede, and then there is only the road ahead and the dim English countryside in the gray early evening light. The port is a world you have heard described but not previously entered, and entering it now is like crossing into a different order of reality. The scale of it is the first thing, the sheer accumulated mass of the operation made physical and present. Ships in numbers that seem to exceed what any single harbor could contain. Vessels of every type and size pressed close against the docks and anchored in the deeper water beyond. The whole harbor alive with the movement of men and materiel in a coordinated flow that is almost beautiful in its complexity, the way a mechanism is beautiful when all its parts are moving correctly. Cranes swing overhead, chains run and rattle. Men shout in the functional, abbreviated language of physical work being done at speed. You move with your unit through this toward the vessel assigned to you. The docks underfoot are solid and unyielding in a way that you register because you know they won't be for much longer. Around you, the smells change in layers: sea salt and fuel oil, the particular metallic dampness of a working harbor, the smell of paint and rope, and the faint organic smell of water that has been enclosed and used. These are not unpleasant smells. They are simply the smells of this moment, and you take them in with the same attentive neutrality you have applied to everything else today. The vessel is smaller than you expected, which you know is not rational. You have been told the dimensions. You have rehearsed the embarkation, but the expectation and the reality still require a moment of adjustment. You board in sequence, your unit moving with the practiced efficiency of men who have rehearsed this, and whose bodies, therefore, know what to do, even when their minds are occupied with other things. Below deck, the space is close and dim, lit by lights that give everything a yellowish cast, already warm with the presence of men and engines. You find your position and settle into it. The floor moves slightly beneath you as the vessel adjusts to the weight of its occupants. You set your rifle across your knees. You wait. The waiting here is different from the waiting in the camp. In the camp, the waiting had space around it. You could walk, find company or solitude, change your relationship to the hours. Here the waiting is confined, pressed in on all sides by the physical reality of the vessel and the men it contains. The air is immediate and close. You can smell the man beside you, and he can smell you, and there is something both uncomfortable and oddly human about this, a reduction to the most basic terms of proximity and shared circumstance. You have known these men for months. You know who snores and who doesn't, who is loud when nervous and who goes quiet, who needs to talk and who needs silence. In this small enclosed space, all of that knowledge has an unexpected intimacy. The engines have been running for some time before the vessel begins to move. You feel the change, a slight shift in the vibration underfoot, a new quality to the sound, before you can confirm it as movement. Some men look up at the ceiling, as if they can see through it. The man beside you murmurs something low that you don't catch. Then the vessel is moving, and the moving is real, and there is a point at which England is behind you, and what is ahead is not yet visible, and you exist for a while in that between space, on the dark water between the known and the unknown. The channel at night in early June is not calm, but it is not at its worst. The vessel pitches in long, slow movements that are bearable in the abstract and less so in the body. Several men are sick in the first hour. No one makes anything of this. It is simply what happens, a physical reality to be managed without commentary. The smell below deck thickens and becomes complicated. You fix your attention on a point in the middle distance that doesn't really exist and breathe through your mouth and keep your body still against the movement of the vessel. Time becomes difficult to measure. You are aware of its passing without being able to account for it. Above you, through the hull, you can hear the sea. It is constant and indifferent. The same sea that has moved against these shores for all of recorded time and considerably before it. The same sea that carried other men toward other coasts in other centuries for other reasons. All of them convinced of the necessity of what they were doing, all of them reduced by the situation to the same essential condition, a body in a vessel, moving toward something that cannot be taken back once it begins. You think about this briefly, and then you stop thinking about it, because it is not useful, and the night is long, and you need to be somewhere functional when it ends. At some point in the darkness, an hour in or two or more, the counting has become unreliable. You become aware that others around you are in varying states of prayer, or something close to it, not formal, not announced. A man 2 places from you holds something small in his closed fist. Another has his eyes closed and his lips moving with a patience that has abandoned self-consciousness entirely. You do not judge this. You have your own version of it, your own private inventory of held things, of names and faces turned over in the mind with a steadiness that is neither quite prayer nor quite not. Your mother, the girl at home, the neighbors your mother wrote about, the river someone described in the evening light in a field in Hampshire that is very far away now and getting farther. The vessel continues. The sea continues. Around you the darkness is total except for the instrument lights and the occasional red glow of cigarettes that someone has lit without asking permission and no one has moved to extinguish. The small red point floats in the dark like a signal, like something trying to locate itself. It illuminates nothing, but it is there, and in the particular darkness of this crossing, that is enough. A small human warmth traveling with you out across the water toward the gray beginning of the morning that is, you know now with the certainty of a thing that cannot be reconsidered, already coming. The gray beginning of the morning arrives not as light, but as a gradual lessening of darkness, a slow dilution of the black into something that has no color yet but is no longer night. You become aware of it before you can see it, a change in the quality of the air, or perhaps simply the internal clock that has been running all night finally arriving at the hour it has been counting toward. Around you, men who have been in various states of half-sleep or private wakefulness begin to surface. There is no single moment of waking. It happens in increments, the way the light happens, each man returning to the present tense of the vessel and the water and the hour in his own time. You have not slept. This is not surprising. You have been horizontal for stretches of the crossing, your body making the practical concession of rest while your mind maintained a quiet, persistent vigil that you did not choose and could not set aside. You are not tired in the way that sleep deprivation usually produces. You are something else, a state that has no clean name, a condition of extreme alertness that has passed through exhaustion and emerged on the other side as something almost crystalline, everything perceived with the precision and separateness that ordinary hours don't usually offer. The cold metal of the deck beneath you, the weight of your kit against your back, the sound of the man beside you breathing with a steadiness that suggests he actually managed some sleep, which you register with something between admiration and envy. The vessel's motion has changed slightly. The long, slow pitching of the open channel has compressed into something shorter and more irregular, which means you understand without needing to verify it that you are closer to the coast. The shoreline is doing what shorelines do to water, interrupting the open rhythm of the sea, pushing back, creating the particular choppiness of approach. Your body processes this information before your mind fully catches up, and your hands move to your rifle without instruction, checking the familiar surfaces, confirming what is already confirmed. Around you, other hands are doing similar things, a collective unconscious inventory, everyone making sure of what they already know. The sounds from outside have changed too. Through the hull, you have been hearing the sea all night, constant and uninflected. Now there are other sounds woven into it, distant, low, irregular, that your mind categorizes with a calm that surprises you. Because what you are hearing is the beginning of the naval bombardment, the guns of the fleet engaging the coast, each report arriving as a deep concussive thud that you feel in your chest before you hear it in your ears. The sounds overlap and layer into something continuous, a low thunder that has no weather behind it, that does not roll in and roll away, but simply persists, a permanent condition of the approaching morning. You breathe. You adjust your grip. You wait. There is a period, it may be 20 minutes, it may be less, where time abandons its ordinary structure entirely and becomes something else, a medium rather than a measure, something you move through rather than count. The sounds outside increase. The vessel's engine changes pitch. Men around you make small adjustments. A strap tightened, a helmet repositioned. A body shifted from one posture to another with the particular deliberateness of someone arranging himself for something specific. No one speaks. The silence is not absence, it is the most present thing in the vessel, held collectively, a silence that every man is actively maintaining because speaking into it would break something that is, for this moment, necessary. You think with a precision that surprises you given everything about the field in Hampshire. The evening light. The harmonica. The man describing the river near his hometown with an exactness that was really about something else, about the need to confirm the reality of a place that would persist regardless of what happened here. You think about this for a moment and then it releases, not pushed away, but simply completed, a thought that has run its course and made way for the present. The officer at the front of the vessel is talking. His voice is level, not loud, delivering instructions that are not new. You have heard these instructions in various forms many times, but that carry now a finality that earlier rehearsals didn't contain. He moves through the sequence of what is about to happen with a steady specificity, and you listen with the focused, receptive attention of a man for whom these words are no longer preparation, but actual, immediate coordinates. Your body is ahead of him slightly, already orienting to what he is describing, your muscles making their own arrangements. The sky, when you finally see it, when a man near the opening shifts, and a section of the whole that has been obscuring the outside is no longer between you and it, is a particular color that you will remember for the rest of your life without being able to describe it adequately to someone who wasn't there. It is not yet blue. It is not gray exactly. It is the color of the hour before the world has fully committed to becoming itself, a provisional color, hesitant at the edges, and against it the shapes of other vessels are visible, dark and close, and beyond them, emerging from the dimness with the slow patience of something enormous, the coast. You see it in pieces first, a darkness above the water that is not water, that has edges and mass, and the particular stillness of land seen from the sea. Then, as the vessel continues and the light continues its reluctant accumulation, more detail, the pale strip at the waterline that is the beach itself, and behind it the rise of terrain, and above the terrain the smoke, which is substantial and in several places, and moves upward and sideways in the morning air, with a quality that is neither natural nor accidental. The bombardment has been doing its work. What that work has produced you cannot yet see clearly, but you can see its signature in the sky above the coast, and you understand it as information. The sounds are no longer distant. They have become immediate, directional, specific. The difference between hearing combat at a remove and being close enough to distinguish individual reports is a difference in kind rather than degree, and your body makes the adjustment to this new proximity with an automaticity that the months of training have installed in your nervous system without your full awareness. You are not calm, exactly. Calm is not the right word for what this is, but you are functional, and functioning is what is required, and the two things have converged in a way that the training was always trying to produce, and has apparently produced. The ramp is still closed. This is the last interval, the final period of the waiting that has been, in various forms, your primary occupation for months. Here it is reduced to its essence, a few minutes, perhaps less, in a vessel that is still moving, still approaching, still converting distance into arrival. The ramp is a door between one condition and another, and on this side of it, you are still the man who wrote letters and played cards and lay in a hut in a field in England, listening to the camp settle into sleep. On the other side of it, you will be something else, something continuous with that man, but changed by the crossing of this particular threshold in a way that cannot be anticipated and cannot be taken back. Around you the men are standing now, or as close to standing as the space allows, bodies angled forward with the compressed readiness of the position. You can see the faces of the men nearest to you, with a clarity that the long darkness of the crossing didn't permit. And what you see in them is not what you might have expected from the outside. Not fear exactly, or not only fear, but something more complex and harder to name, a kind of absolute presence. Every man entirely located in this moment, no part of him anywhere else, which is its own form of intensity, a state of being so completely in the present tense that the past and the future have temporarily ceased to exist as usable categories. The vessel shudders, the engine note changes again. You are very close now. Through the hull the sounds are almost continuous, layered over each other so thoroughly that individual reports have merged into a kind of sustained percussion, and underneath it, present even through the engine and the sea, and everything else, you can hear what you understand to be small arms fire, a different sound, sharper and more immediate, a sound that has a different relationship to the human body than the deep concussions of the naval guns, a sound that your body understands with a directness that bypasses language entirely. The man beside you, you know his name, you know his hometown, you know he has a younger brother he is proud of, turns briefly toward you. What passes between you in that moment is not a word, and not quite a look in the ordinary sense, but something more fundamental, a recognition that two people exchange when they are about to enter something together that they may not exit together, an acknowledgment that is too large for language, and so dispenses with it entirely. You return it. You face forward. The cold air coming through the gaps in the hull is the air of the French coast, which is a different air than the air of the English camp, though you could not say precisely how. It carries salt and smoke, and something mineral and overturned, the smell of earth that has been disturbed, and beneath it something older and more permanent, the smell of the sea itself, which is the same sea you have been crossing all night, which connects this shore to that one, which has been here before all of this, and will be here after. The hydraulics of the ramp engage. You hear them before you feel them, a mechanical groan, a releasing of tension that has been held, a giving way that is also an opening. The light that enters as the ramp descends is the most specific light you have ever experienced. The actual light of this actual morning falling across the actual water between the vessel and the actual shore. And it is pale and cold, and without any of the qualities that light has in memory, no warmth, no beauty, no quality that the words available to you can adequately hold. It is simply the light of what is happening, the light of right now, which is the only light there is. The ramp hits the water. The water is shockingly cold, cold in a way that is immediate and total, cold that enters through your boots and your trousers and announces itself to every part of you at once, cold that is not a temperature, but a presence, an entity you are now moving through toward the beach that is visible ahead of you. Closer than you expected, its sand pale in the morning light, its obstacles casting their angular shadows, the smoke above it moving sideways in the wind with a steady indifference to everything below it. You move, your body carries you forward into the water, which is at your knees, and then your thighs, and then your waist, and then receding again, as the bottom rises beneath you and the beach comes closer. And the sounds around you are everything at once, the sea, and the engines, and the fire, and the voices of men, and the particular sounds that you do not name even internally, because naming them would require a relationship to them that you cannot afford to have right now. You move. The sand is firmer than you expected underfoot when you finally reach it. Your boots leave impressions that the water immediately begins to fill. The morning is fully arrived now. The pale, hesitant light of the approach has resolved into something more committed. A gray brightening that illuminates the beach with a clarity that is almost merciless, every surface visible, every shadow accounted for. The whole enormous human fact of what is happening here laid out in the cold morning light with a specificity that no map and no briefing and no rehearsal could have fully prepared you for. This is the place. This is the moment. The waiting is over, and what has replaced it is something that will take the rest of your life to understand, though you do not know this yet. You run. You do not remember all of it. This is the first thing you understand, weeks later, when the trying to remember begins in earnest, that the morning did not record itself in your mind the way you expected it to, in sequence with the logical progression of one thing following another. What it left instead are fragments, vivid and discontinuous, separated by intervals of blankness that are not quite forgetting but are not quite memory either. A face, a sound, the texture of wet sand under your palms, the color of the sky at a specific moment. These things are present and will remain present for the rest of your life, with a clarity that ordinary experience rarely produces. The connective tissue between them is gone, or was never formed, or exists in a part of you that does not communicate in words. The days after the landing are their own kind of education. You move inland with your unit through a landscape that is both ordinary and entirely transformed. Norman fields and hedgerows and stone farmhouses and country. Roads that have existed in essentially this form for centuries, now occupied by a violence that is temporary but absolute in its present tense, that has no interest in the history of the place or the lives it has contained. The countryside absorbs it with the patience of something old, the way land always absorbs what passes over it, the way the grass grows back, the way the stone walls that line these fields have already survived things that have left no trace except in the quality of their endurance. You sleep in fields and ditches in the ruins of things. You eat when there is something to eat. You perform the functions that the situation requires with the focused competence that the months of preparation installed in you. And this competence is real, and it serves you. And beneath it runs a current of something else, a state of sustained and extreme aliveness that has no peacetime equivalent, in which every sense is operating at a register you have never previously accessed. The light on the hedgerows. The specific weight of silence between one sound and the next. The smell of the ground after rain, which is identical to the smell of any ground after rain anywhere, which connects this place improbably to every other place you have ever stood in the rain, to the backyard at home, to a schoolyard, to a road you walked once on a summer afternoon a lifetime ago. The man from Ohio is alive. This is something you confer in the first hours and carry with you as a specific known thing. Others from your unit you account for in similar fashion, present or not present. Each accounting made quickly and filed away, because the situation does not permit extended dwelling, because the situation is continuous and demanding, and dwelling is a luxury that belongs to some future version of these days that has not yet arrived. You will dwell later. Later is when the weight of it will become accessible, when the anesthetic of necessity will wear off, and the full inventory of what has happened will begin to present itself, incrementally, over months and years, in the way that experience reveals itself, not at the moment of occurrence, but in the long afterward. Weeks pass, the front moves. Normandy becomes a place you were rather than a place you are. Its specific geography, the beaches, the bluffs, the small towns, receding into the past, in the same way that England receded across the water in the hours before dawn on the morning of the crossing. You carry it with you, as you carry everything. The load is not heavy in any single moment. It accumulates. There are letters from home that catch up to you eventually, forwarded through the military postal system, with a delay that means they arrive in batches, several at once, and you read them in reverse order, working backward through the weeks of your mother's life, her account of the garden, the neighbors, small events in the town that have continued their ordinary progress entirely unaware of, or at least undisturbed by, what has been happening here. You find this both comforting and slightly vertiginous, the way it always is when you are reminded that the world has many centers and yours is only one of them, that somewhere a garden has been requiring attention and receiving it while you were doing what you were doing, and both of these things are equally real, equally continuous, equally part of the fabric of what the world is made of. You write back. You have always written carefully here, but now you write with an additional care that is harder to account for, a precision, not just about what you include and what you omit, but about how you hold the act of writing itself, as if you understand something now about the fragility of communication, about the distance between one interior life and another, and the extraordinary effort required to cross it, even partially. You describe what you can. You ask about the garden. You mention that the countryside here, when it is quiet, has a beauty that surprises you. The light on the fields in the late afternoon, the stone walls, the particular green of the hedgerows. This is true. You are not softening things for her benefit. Beauty has not been cancelled by what has happened. If anything, it is more present, more insistent, appearing in the gaps between everything else with a persistence that feels almost argumentative, as if the world is making a case for itself. Summer deepens across Normandy. The days are long and warm in the way of northern, French summers, different from the English spring you lived in for so many months. More golden, more decided. The light arriving each morning with a commitment that the English light never quite managed. You move through it. The war continues its work, which is grinding and technical, and has a momentum that individuals do not direct so much as participate in, each man a component in something enormous, whose full shape is visible only from a height that no one at ground level can access. You do what is required. The days accumulate. The front continues to move. There are moments of stillness, brief intervals when the situation permits something like rest, and in these intervals the men around you revert, partially and imperfectly, to something resembling the men you knew in the camp in England, in the huts and the mess hall and the evenings with the harmonica and the card games. The reversion is never complete. You are all different now, changed by the crossing of the threshold in ways that are not dramatic or visible but are structural, a shift in the interior architecture that you can feel without being able to fully describe. But the attempt is real, and the continuity it reaches for is real, and there is something in watching a man you have known for months laugh at something in the particular way that is entirely his own that constitutes one of the most specific forms of reassurance available in these weeks. You think sometimes about the soldiers who did not cross back. You think about them with a directness that is different from sentiment. Not because sentiment is absent, but because sentiment alone seems inadequate to the fact of them, to the specific weight of individual people who existed with complete particularity, their voices, their habits, their hometowns described in certain light, their sisters and their rivers and their card-playing, and who no longer exist in that form. You think about them in the same way you think about everything important here, not continuously, not with the sustained attention that daily life would make unbearable, but in the pauses, in the intervals between things, with a steadiness that is the closest you can come to an adequate response. The war will last longer than this summer. You know this in the way you know everything here, not all of it. Not the exact shape of it, but enough of its dimensions to understand that what happened on the beach in the cold, pale morning of early June is a beginning, not an ending, one coordinate in a journey whose final destination remains beyond the horizon. This is manageable. You have learned, over the months of waiting and the weeks since, a relationship to the unknown that is different from the one you arrived with, less resistant, less insistent on resolution, more willing to inhabit the interval between what is known and what is not. The waiting in the camp was a training for this too, though you didn't understand it as such at the time. All of it was preparation. The reconstituted eggs, and the card games, and the letters, and the harmonica, in the dusk, and the conversations about ordinary things held with extraordinary care. All of it was making you into someone who could carry this, and continue, and remain, as much as possible, himself. The autumn will come to Normandy the way it comes everywhere, the green deepening first and then turning, the light changing its angle, the air acquiring that particular cool that is the first word of winter's approach. The fields will continue. The stone walls will continue. The sea, not far to the north, will continue its indifferent and ancient work, moving between the shores as it has always moved, carrying nothing and everything, connecting the places that the men in the vessels crossed between in the darkness of a single early June morning, a morning that was in some ways like any morning, cold, gray, hesitant at its beginning, and in other ways like no morning that has ever come before or will come again. What you will carry from this in the end is not the violence, though the violence is real and will remain real in the way that real things remain. What you will carry is something more granular and more human, the specific texture of the waiting, the weight of letters written with uncommon care, the sound of a harmonica at dusk in a field that was briefly a city and is now just a field again, the face of a man turning toward you in the moment before the ramp descended, the cold of the water, the color of the light, the sand giving way underfoot as you ran toward what the morning required of you. These are the things that survive the large events and outlast the explanations and resist the simplifications that history, of necessity, must eventually perform. They are the residue of the actual experience, intimate, irreducible, belonging only to the people who were there. History remembers the scale of it, the ships, the aircraft, the beaches, the turning point. And the scale is real, and the significance is real. And the world that came after was shaped in part by what happened on this coast on this day, in ways that continue to ramify forward in time and touch lives that have no direct connection to anything that occurred on that morning. But the men who crossed the water did not experience it as a turning point. They experienced it as a morning, cold, specific, demanding, frightening, beautiful in the terrible way that extreme circumstances sometimes produce beauty, a beauty that has nothing to do with comfort and everything to do with aliveness, with the sheer fact of being present in a moment that is completely itself. There is something in this that belongs not only to the men of this crossing, not only to this coast or this war or this century, but to something more persistent in the human experience, the condition of ordinary people asked to carry extraordinary weight, and the discovery, repeated in every generation and every place that has known such moments, that the carrying is possible, that the person equal to it is very often the same unremarkable person who was playing cards and writing to his mother the week before. This is not consolation exactly, but it is something, a kind of testament to what people are made of when the situation requires them to find out. These are the stories that Another POV will keep returning to, not the histories of the decisions made at the top, but the experience of the person at the level of the ground, the water, the cold morning, the weight of the pack, the face of the man beside you. If this kind of witness, this way of looking at the past from the inside, means something to you, then stay with us. There are more perspectives waiting.